It's a pleasure to see all of you here. We've been looking forward to this for many years now, and it's already 6 years ago that we opened the new presentations, following thorough but in relatively quick restoration of the building. At that point, I was one of the sort of senior curators that were given the responsibility of one sort of piece of the cake. So I was chaired the group of people who worked on the 17th century. So my examples will be only from that part of the collection. This will help me keep time, hopefully, but it will also I will be talking about decisions that I was actively involved in. Decisions I wasn't really actively involved in include the idea to not go back to what the museum looked like in 1866 when it was inaugurated. In one cabinet upstairs in the 17th century part, now housing a little bit of a small portion of our icon collection, you can see the decorative paintings that have been reconstructed from the original paint layers beneath what you see there. And the color schemes were in the 60s, 1860s, when the museum was inaugurated. Like a little bit of primary colors, but then big bowls of brown and gray sort of poured into them. And we did not feel that we wanted to go back to that. There was a bit of sort of antiquarian encouragement for us to reconstruct as much as possible, but we decided to go for brighter colors or more saturated colors. And one reason we thought that was okay was that when we looked at the architect's original drawings that dated from the 1840s, they were the colors were much brighter. So I think from the 40s to the 60s, fashion changed. So that allowed us to sort of go along the road that we wanted to. So we actually, as curators, were, with the help of scenographers, did choose the colors. There was not a sort of external part coming in, designers deciding. So we were given, in I think, unusual way, not free reins, but encouragement to work on the colors. There was a lot of public interest in the renovation of the museum building, and and I think a lot of people were interested primarily in that. People who are interested in architecture and in historical restorations. And I remember when the museum was empty, we received the audience to look at the empty rooms. And they asked a lot about the architecture and the colors. And then I said, and then we hope to hang our collection of 17th century paint. And then they walked away because they weren't interested in that. They were just interested in the buildings. So this is the 17th century part in a model provided by Henrik Wiedenheim, who is one of our in-house scenographers, with the color schemes suggested by him, not followed in every case. And Henrik works with paper models, even though we also were using CAD models, very detailed ones, towards the final stages of the process. And the 17th century galleries are on the top floor. They have a number of smaller cabinets and actually just one big gallery and some sort of medium-sized gallery rooms as well. We decided not to go for the dark gray that we discussed, but for a dark blue color. And I saw in Francis' presentation that these are now fashionable colors and will no doubt go out of fashion very shortly. But I'm quite happy with the result using that color. It changes a lot with the weather. We have both natural and artificial lighting, and I think it sort of responds well to both. And this is part of our web page where we give the color code, because people are actually saying that I'd like to paint my own room in this. And that's a secret we've decided not to keep a secret. This is what the gallery looked on the one or 2 days before the sort of official inauguration. We decided to invite school children from different parts of Sweden to come on the train, and they were given T-shirts according to the group they were in, so as not to get lost. And I really thought that was quite a moving moment. We had I won't go into this, but we had a document with principles for the display that we should think about, and it was how to think about the way the objects were displayed. So one decision was to make it chronological, and I think that is the easiest way to communicate this type of collection. It can, of course, be combined with other ways, but we decided to go that. We decided to leave what had been the principle before, namely to show paintings and sculpture on the top floor, and applied arts on the first floor, and instead to have a circuit going over both floors and combining, integrating 2- and 3-dimensional art. It was meant to be dynamic in the sense that things should and are being exchanged for other objects. And we wanted really to show a lot more objects than before. Well-known and less known is the phrase used, and that means that we were encouraged to look at things that were not the sort of, the famous paintings or the famous objects from the National Museum, but see if we actually owned things that were interesting, where you could present other types of research, other types of stories, and other tastes. So I think we were also quite actively trying to be not unconventional, but uncanonical in our text, in our taste. We also wanted this to be a place where people would come to meet, and that actually happened a lot during the first 1.5 years or so before the pandemic. Then we had a change of government and the reintroduction of entrance fees, which took away that part of people who, a lot of a younger audience that would come and just hang out and take selfies and spend half an hour and so on. And I really regret that that has gone now, but hopefully not forever. We didn't want to suppress the architectural character that had been done at various stages before, but we decided to sort of go with the 19th century character of most of the rooms. It's not easy on the first floor where there are barely no walls, which you will see. And we had a principle of offering a contemporary perspective on history and a historical perspective on the present, which can be interpreted in many ways, of course. When talking about the individual objects, we were given these criteria, and they are explained in the document that we were looking at. And first of all, even if this tells a good story and it's not an attractive object, think again, and vice versa in a way. We were, on the latter part of the list, we were encouraged to reflect. We should consider consciously the objects in relation to the established canon. So I think we both wanted to, but we were also told to do something which sort of ran against the art historical canon. We were encouraged to reflect on power relations and upon visible as well as invisible aspects of human life, such as gender, sexual identity, ethnicity, disabilities, age, religion, socioeconomic background, etc. We were divided into teams, and we had teams for every room, and they varied. And for the 17th century, they included me, Carina Fryklund, who is here, Linda Hinners, curator of sculptors, Eva-Lena Karlsson, Mikael Ernstell, curator of applied arts, Merit Leine and Anders Bengtsson, who have left the museum during the process. And these were the curators, but also scenographers, conservators, and photographers and designers. So Henrik started out giving us suggestions for, well, actually we started out suggesting themes for cabinets, but also for parts of the larger rooms. So in this case, an example, the cabinet close to nature, where we wanted to consider sort of realistic or illustrations of natural subjects that were sort of sometimes between a scientific illustration and still lifes, also with the child's perspective, hanging things low, showing animals, engaging in various activities. And we put on, for the opening display, a number of works on paper that were recently acquired, and we have not shown them since 2018, but we are showing them now again for you, which was a conscious, with something we decided to do. So you can see the design and then how it came out. This is another example where we have one cabinet that we decided to dedicate to changing displays of works on paper. I think we opened with Rembrandt drawings, and we thought at one time to include also paintings that could relate to these drawings, but we abandoned that and had only drawings. And at present, we show a display of late 16th century hunting, hawks and falcons from the Munich court, which have been the subject of a special conservation project and research project. In the collector's cabinet, we decided to show a number of objects, or different types of objects that we couldn't really show before because we didn't have showcases in this part of the collection in the 17th century in the paintings galleries. But we have now showcases such allow us to show tiny objects. We have small coins and gems, but also small-scale paintings and small-scale sculpture from Italy, from France, from the Netherlands, to suggest a wealthy collector in, say, Antwerp, perhaps in the mid-17th century. Now to talk about the big gallery. This is what the gallery, we knew that we had to sort of start with the Oath of the Batavians. That had to be the departure point. And we knew that we had to discuss with the picture's owner, the Academy of Fine Arts. So, and this is the way it has been shown for the last 80 or before us, for 100 years before. This is what it looked in 2004 with its old frame, 18th century frame, and this is the new frame it was given in 2005, and the way it was displayed. And we started deciding that we didn't want to have it. We had to sort of create a room in the room where it would be the sort of focal point. But as we were introducing these walls and sort of modules to display paintings, but also furniture and sculpture and applied arts objects, we created sort of smaller spaces in the big gallery to use more of the wall and more of the floor space. So this was the idea. You can make out perhaps what was the intention. These modules, these movable walls are designed by an American architect, Joel Sanders architect, that have worked extensively with the museum galleries or museum displays in the US and elsewhere. And they are changeable. We can decide to do certain things, but we can't do exactly. We are not showing applied arts objects or sculptures against the walls. The walls are for paintings. And this is how it came out. for this gallery, it's not only for, it used to be in the sort of two schools before, Dutch and Flemish painting, but now I was going to show all paintings, European paintings from the 17th century. So not only Flanders and Holland, but also France and Italy. And I thought this was challenging, but in an interesting way, because I had to think quite a lot about not what was the difference between Italian art and Dutch art, but what unified European painting in the 17th century. How do you explain what is common features? And just to reflect a little bit on this sort of personal aspect of the curator, is that when I did my 17th century research in the 1990s, it was sort of very popular to talk about rhetoric as the sort of common intellectual interest of all the sort of humanistic activities. So this sort of persuading with the help of either sort of Baroque apparatus or with just realism, and I sort of had to think about and put these into words for the first label, which took many hours. And I'm not displeased with the result. I think that what I realized was the importance of the Caravagist movement that had never been a main feature in this room, where there were the Rembrandts and the Rubenses, and that was not sort of an obvious way. But when we started to fill out, the Caravagisti became a big feature. Yes. Some of the preparatory works, of course, we listed themes. These are some slides that Carina showed or prepared 10 years ago for the themes for the Dutch display. Here are some of the paintings that we knew we wanted to show, some of the paintings we wanted to show but didn't have space to show all of them. And some of these themes are illustrated with maybe one painting, because the space is really quite restricted. Another unifying idea was to have a Queen Christina of Sweden to be a pair in different sections of this room. And she does appear now in the coronation portrait by her Dutch painter, David Beck. She appears in her painting by a French painter, Sébastien Baudon, who came to Sweden but was a sort of close, a Poussin alumnus in a way. And she appears in the bust from her last Roman years, very idealized, but in a sort of late classical Baroque sculpture. But I decided in the end against the Justus van Egmont painting, but instead went to show her as a collector of antiquities, where she bought her antiquities from Antwerp, where they had belonged to the burgomaster Nicolas Rocox. And this was fairly new research by a colleague in classical archaeology. One other key object in that gallery is this silver dish by the Flemish goldsmith Karel Bolkol, but it has the stamps of Genoa, and it's signed Karel Bolkol Fiammingo Fekit in 1674, and it's a sort of very Baroque composition, but it also shows Europa on the bull. So to me, it was a way of showing how the migrating artists, migrating forms, the international Baroque was something that unified Europe rather than anything else. And I wanted to show that as well with these migrating forms, various fashions coming from France, but being transmitted through prints or through drawings or through objects, but also perhaps migrating from silver to ceramics and in other ways. But here, one of the lessons learned is that even though I know exactly why all the objects are there, and there is an app which you can download, and you can look up these objects in the text. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I'm saying that this app has never been wildly popular, and that people, look at this and think that I'll come back and look at it some other day. Another way of integrating this idea, we don't have a particularly strong Italian collection, so this is the first display. It has been changed since. I thought to show a Dutch painter, but painting in a Caravagist style in Naples, probably, Matthias Stom. It's a brilliant painting, so that to leave the idea of the sort of genetics or the origin of the painter as a principle for display. And for the general look, I didn't want to go for this type, and I didn't want to go back to the very sparse display of the that I had grown up with. But I think one picture that's kind of inspired me was this, the reconstruction by Carl Nordenfalk of the hang in the Royal Palace in the late 18th century. And I realized that they wouldn't let me get away with doing the Batavians like that, but I sort of probably followed my taste for these sort of symmetrical displays a little bit too much, but I think this works well. It's the opposite wall from the Oath of the Batavians, and I had to think about which is the sort of a strong painting that could match it. I think the Roche de la Tour is sort of doing its job there. Also, I think that we're going from the sort of Dutch and Flemish Caravagisti to de la Tour and sort of to classicism, and I think that these sort of, when I talk about the room, I talk about those sort of gradual spread of the Caravagist movement, but I'm not sure everyone else does. We also included some faience in this display, although it's a display of mainly paintings. And I think we also stress the fact that this is the old royal collection. It has in many cases the old beautiful 18th century frames that were put on the pictures by Queen Louisa Ulrika. We don't talk about her in this room, but it's not something that we are sort of trying to get away from. And my predecessor, Magnus Olausson, he decided to take the old frame, the Carl Gustaf Tessin's frame for the Reisdal landscape, which he put back on the painting when it was shown at the Louvre in a show about Carl Gustaf Tessin, and we decided to keep it. One lesson learned is that when you show things high up, you show them, people can see that we have them, but you miss a lot of the beautiful passages in this painting, for instance, by Jan Veit, which I photographed when it was being installed. We have a few other rooms. We have a Dutch genre painting room, which is now, doesn't have the very dense hang, to have a bit of variation. We also have the Bielke state bed, important French state bed, where, of course, we had to have a showcase. This was a complicated installation, and we decided to leave our principle of not having sort of anything modern added when we felt it needed the plumes. So the plumes were made by a designer for the opera who does plumes for them. And it's not a period room, but it suggests the proportions and the way it would be displayed. About lessons learned, we know from our educators that they really want to talk about this Swedish portrait of a boy or a young man surrounded by monkeys and parrots. He was attached to the court in Sweden in the 16th, 17th, 80s, but it's now shown in the cabinet that talks about the rest of the world, foreign materials, exotic things that come into Sweden, and we think that it's a bit unfortunate, because it was quite unfortunate, because you have to talk about it. The context becomes exoticism. So we are moving it after the summer to the portrait cabinet, where we show we'll go show him with the Queen, and whose page he probably was. It's probably the same person, and with other members in her circle, which is, I think, historically more adequate and also interesting. Another lesson learned is that even though we want to include many paintings by women painters, they are also frequently asked for as loans. So, and in this case, the Swedish self-portrait by the Swedish painter Amalia von Königsmark with an allegory has been on two exhibitions in Northern America, and we were of course happy for this painting to be better known and shown abroad. But of course, it creates a hole here, and especially for this occasion, we're very sad that the Judith Leister boy is not on display. It's been lent to a show in Denmark, which we really wanted to support. But for those of you who happen to be here still on Wednesday and Thursday, it's coming up on Wednesday morning. So I'm not asking you to sort of skip your excursions, but if you get back early or are still here on Thursday, you can come and see it. Also, to talk about what is the context of, to show a more diverse selection of stories or of people. I think it's one thing I've realized is it's so much easier to talk about the Swedish models because we know things about them, and we can use documents to talk about things that are difficult to know about in other ways. And with Christina, for instance, there are a lot of sources about her sexual self-identification and how that changed and how it was fluid and many things these sources are difficult to interpret, but they are there. Also, on the final note, is that labeling is the big challenge, both in the sense that if you have a dense hang, to explain what is actually where, to have translations into English, to make it obvious. And we wrote a book with many of the label texts that had a deadline long before the opening, so at least we had a sort of sound basis to work from. And then when I'm showing this, the final thing I'll say is that these list of terms, they are in Swedish, but you can make some of them out, was a list that I made from old labels, I think. And we had a seminar where we said, are these too difficult, or could they be on a label, or do they need to be explained? And we had a 2-hour seminar, and I think we got to the third term. And I think it was the most animated discussion I've ever been part of. Thank you.